I recently built my first ever Mini-ITX PC, and despite all the limitations with space in this thing, I wanted to make it as powerful as possible for gaming and for video production. But just how powerful is it? Well, we're about to find out. What's up, my dude? Your friendly neighborhood Tony here, and welcome back to the Spare Tech Room, where I try to channel the power of hyperfixation to hopefully help you make better tech choices. Now, if you haven't seen my full Mini-ITX build video, I'll link it right up here for you, and at the end of this video. But in short, I packed a Ryzen 7800X3D in here with an RTX 3080 and 64 gigs of DDR5 RAM. If you want to see the full parts list, I'll link that below for you. I'll also try to find the best prices on everything to help you out. Of course, if you do use those links, it also helps out this channel, so I appreciate that. But for now, let's go ahead and fire this thing up. We'll run some synthetic benchmarks, test out thermals and power draw. Then we'll run a few games to see what kind of FPS we're getting. Before we do though, two things. One, I know that screen capturing on the computer also does eat away at some of the juice. So I'm basically just gonna flip this camera around and show you my screen. So there shouldn't be any hit to performance. And two, this is my first time doing this specific kind of video, so please don't yell at me if I get something wrong. I will cry. Just kidding, but if there are specific benchmarks or games that you'd like to see me test, absolutely let me know in the comments. I might be able to make a follow-up video for you or at least respond to your comment with the results. I'll do my best. Okay. On to some benchmarks. Okay, so here we are on the computer and I've pulled up a couple apps. One of them you'll see here is Cinebench R23, and that's the tool that's basically going to tell us what kind of power we're getting out of our CPU. Then on the right-hand side, we've got hardware info. I'll link to both of these programs in the description box below. This is basically going to track how your temperatures are doing and how much power you're pulling. I also have the computer plugged into a voltage meter, which is going to tell me how much power I'm pulling from the wall. And I'll be sure to let you know what the peaks are for that. Right now, it idles anywhere between 78 to 100 watts, generally around 80 or so though at idle. But for now, let's go ahead and run the multi-core performance test here and see what kind of scores we're getting. And I'll go ahead and fast forward this so that way you guys don't have to wait around for it. Right now, we're pulling about 155 watts to 160 from the wall. You can see our temps over on the right-hand side. It looks to be capping out at around 75.5 Celsius, which is a reasonable temperature. Now, again, I'm definitely not an expert when it comes to this kind of thing, so I do wonder, is this some sort of artificial cap that's on the CPU that won't allow it to go above that? I'm not sure. If you know, let me know in the comments below. And here we are. So it looks like our multi-core performance over on the left-hand side here is 17,768. Now, there is another website that you can pull up, and again, I'll link this in the description. It's called CPU Monkey, and that will tell you kind of the average scores for your particular CPU. And pulling that up myself here separately, it looks like we're right on par. 17,700 is kind of the average for the Ryzen 7800X3D. So we're getting exactly what we should be getting out of this CPU in our multi-core score. Let's go ahead and run the single core score to see what we're getting out of that. And as you would guess with the single core score, right now we're pulling about 103, 104 watts from the wall. So power draw is going to be a little bit less for single core activities, but of course you expect that. And once again, we're peaking out at around 75.5 Celsius, which does make me wonder if that's kind of the limit that this CPU will allow. I might have to look into that a little bit. All right, and there we go. It looks like our CPU single core score on Cinebench R23 is at 1782. Now, the kind of average that I've seen on CPU Monkey for the single core score for this particular CPU is at around 1800, so we're just a little bit shy of that. I mean, that is a very, very small difference there, so I wouldn't be very concerned. So it looks like you're still getting around what you would expect for this particular CPU. Now, the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to test the RAM. So I'm going to pull up Puget Bench for Photoshop, and we're going to run that to see how our RAM is doing. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start the test here and see what we get. Now, I'm not super familiar with this particular benchmark, so we're going to let this run and see what kind of results we get. It's going to fire up Photoshop. Now, this is going to be really good, of course, for Photoshop, for Lightroom, anything like that that's going to require a lot of RAM. Again, I have 64 gigs of DDR5 RAM in this unit, so we should get a good result out of this, but let's go ahead and let it run and we'll find out. I should also mention the power draw from the wall when running this is a little all over the place. I've seen it drop down into the 80s as far as 80 watts, going up to 120, 130 watts. So it definitely feels like that's going to fluctuate a bit when you're dealing with these kind of tasks. Another thing I think I should mention here is that I've got the computer right next to me and it is blowing really cool air out of it. So I was expecting for it to be a bit hot to the touch, or at least to get some kind of warm air pumping out of it. but the way that we have the airflow set up on this seems to be doing really well because it's actually cold to the touch. Okay, so here we are. As you can tell, the overall score is 9,959. And if we click back over to the actual program, it's going to give you that benchmark score there as well. One of the main things you're looking for here is that if at any point while running this program or this benchmark, if your system crashes at all, then that means you're going to have a RAM issue. So as long as it runs successfully all the way through, you should be totally fine. Okay, so we got a couple more benchmarks we're going to run here. This is Geekbench 6. We have both a CPU and a GPU test to run. So let's start with the CPU benchmark and see what we get out of that. Okay, and here we go. So our CPU benchmark, our single core score on Geekbench 6 is 2739, multi-core score 15602. Let's go ahead and run the GPU test to see what kind of scores we get for that. And again, my GPU here is an RTX 3080, which I know I possibly could have gotten a more powerful GPU in the system, but it's just what I had and I didn't feel like buying a new GPU because quite frankly, I didn't need anything more powerful than the 3080. All right, and our OpenCL score is 178,475. Okay, so now we're gonna run a few gaming benchmarks. We'll start with 3D Mark, Time Spy, and Firestrike. So we'll just start here with Time Spy, let that run and see what we're getting. Okay, so right now our GPU is really cranking it out. It's pulling about 440 watts from the wall, 450, and seems to be climbing a little bit from there. I'll be sure to let you know what it peaks out at. Okay, and here we go. It looks like our results for 3D Mark Time Spy are 15,745 with a graphics score of 16,338 and a CPU score of 1361. It looks like our temperatures peaked at around 87.5 Celsius on our GPU, and our CPU also got up to about 84.5. So reasonable temperatures there. Let's go ahead and run Firestrike here to see what our DirectX 11 scores end up being. I do also want to mention that while that was running, there was a fair bit of heat coming out of the top of my case here. Nothing alarming, but certainly a fair bit of heat. So we'll go ahead and run Firestrike here, and then we're going to pull up a few games and run some benchmarks on those to see what kind of FPS we're getting. And here we have our Firestrike score. It looks like we're getting 35,586. And you can see some of our broken down scores here, graphics, physics combined. So now let's go ahead and fire up a few games and see what kind of FPS we're getting in real world game usage. Okay, so here we are in CSGO. Now here's the thing, I don't know anything about CSGO. I've not played it before, but I'm gonna go ahead and show you the settings that it just picked out as default. Of course, I'm playing on a 4K monitor, so we're running this at 4K. If I go to the advanced video settings, it looks like our current preset is high. We have 4 times MSAA, pretty much just your standard high settings for the most part across the board. And I was able to activate the Steam overlay for FPS. So let's go ahead and just play a quick practice match here to see what kind of FPS I'm getting in game. Now again, I've never played this game before. I'm not very good at this game, but I just want to show you what kind of FPS you can be getting with this. Okay, as you can see here, we are well over 200 FPS for a bit of it. Well, I don't know what I'm doing. All right, so we're getting in the high 100s, low 200s as far as FPS is concerned while running this at 4K high settings. Oh, geez, I got a sniper somehow? Oh, God. Ah! No scope kill. I don't know how to look down my iron sights or anything like that, so we're just gonna do our best. Oh, got him. Of course, these are all bots, and you're seeing a lot of screen tearing as well because I don't have, I mean, I'm basically just trying to see what the maximum FPS is I can get out of this game. Dude, I am lethal with this thing. So yeah, it looks like around 200 FPS, and not too bad. All right, let's get out of here and try another game. Okay, so I just fired up Fortnite. I've, again, never played this game either, but I went ahead and had it select the best possible settings for my setup. So we'll get into the system here and see what those settings are. Okay, so here we are in the settings. Of course, I'm running this at 4K just to see what we can get out of here. VSync is off. We are going to go ahead and crank up the FPS limit. We'll put that on unlimited using DirectX 12. The graphics quality is auto set, so that went ahead and put it at epic. And if you want to see some of the other settings here, I'll just scroll through those real quick so you know what we're working with. But it looks like mostly epic across the board, and we'll go ahead and turn on show FPS and apply these changes. Let's go back and see if hopefully there's a way to play this without having to play with other people. And it should be showing the FPS once we get in game. And that's really what we're here for. If I manage to be successful in doing anything at all, then that'll be a bonus. Oh boy, okay. It is very choppy here. Now it looks like we're getting somewhere between 60 and 70. This is very choppy. I wonder if that has to do with my internet connection though. But our FPS is kind of all over the place. I wonder if that's going to change once we get on the ground here. Let's find out. Boy, this is really bad. Okay, here we are. Wow, 45 FPS. That is no bueno. I wonder if my settings were off, if I had the wrong settings here, but it's not looking particularly good. I have no idea what I'm doing here. We're also pulling about 400 watts from the wall. I think you can destroy stuff as I understand it. And our FPSs are in the 40s to low 50s whenever we're doing anything in the game. So I wonder if I can change the settings at all. I imagine I can't do that while I'm playing. Let's see. Oh, perhaps we can. Let's go to graphics quality and we'll change that down to high. And let's see if that makes a difference here. Okay, so now we're getting about 65 FPS. I wonder if that's because we're playing at 4K. Might have to change that as well. Let's try that again. So we'll go here. Well, we can't change the resolution just yet. So we'll adjust our graphics setting. Let's just take a look and see what happens when we take it down to medium. All right, now we're getting about 75, 80 FPS, it looks like. So one thing that we might want to consider is not playing this at 4K. Oh, we've got a little chest here. I don't know what that is. I got a potion. Is this a gun? Ho ho, we are no longer defenseless. So these are reasonable settings. If you have a 60 hertz monitor, you'd probably just slap on VSync and call it a day. But if you're really trying to push the FPS on here, I would definitely recommend not playing this at 4K. And we'll test that as soon as someone kills me. I'm just waiting to run into literally anyone, but we can test that out and see what happens when we play this maybe at 1440p. But for now, let's just find a person to kill us. Also seeing a lot of texture pop in, just waiting for literally anyone to come and kill me. There's someone over there. I see him in the distance. Let's go say hi. I cannot believe I just got first place in my first ever attempt at playing this game. I wonder if that happens to everyone and if it's just like a way that they get you hooked. Okay, so now we fired up Cyberpunk 2077. Now I haven't played this game myself, but they do have a benchmark, so we're gonna go ahead and run that. These are just the default settings when I fired up the game for the first time, so I'll scroll through here so you can see what kind of settings we're working with. Ray tracing set to medium, DLSS, and we'll just scroll through here. Texture quality high, and this should give you an idea of what we're working with this particular game. And then we'll just run the benchmark and see what we get. So let's do that. Now I should also mention that as soon as I launched the game, it started pulling 440. Right now it's 480 watts off the wall. So a fair bit of power required. And we're currently sitting at around 50 FPS. Let's see where this goes. You can look in the top left-hand corner to see that. And we'll also run this without ray tracing just to see what the difference is. Now again, this is an RTX 3080. So we should get some decent FPS when it comes to using ray tracing, but without it, undoubtedly, we're going to get a lot more. So we'll try that next. Okay, there we go. There's our results. Average FPS, it looks like about 51, minimum 46, max almost 60. Okay, so what we're going to go ahead and do now then is just turn off ray tracing entirely, and we will rerun that benchmark, keeping all the other settings exactly the same. Let's just see what happens when we turn off ray tracing. Okay, immediately a huge bump in FPS. We were hitting around 50 here. Now we're getting 70 to 75. So that's going to make a big difference just shutting off ray tracing. We'll run this 2 more times after this at 1440p, both with ray tracing on and off, just to see what kind of FPS we're getting with that setup. But right here, it seems that if you want to run this at 4K, you might want to turn off ray tracing and just go 4K with the high settings. All right, and there we go. So we have 73 average FPS, a low of 64, high of 89, almost 90. So that's pretty good. Let's go back to our settings here, and we're going to, first things first, we're going to change our video settings off of 4K. We're going to drop that down to 1440p. Make sure we apply that setting. We also want this to be full screen because of course that's how you'll most likely play it. Then we'll go back to graphics. We'll turn ray tracing back on. So this is 1440p with ray tracing on. Let's see what happens. Okay, here we go. Immediately 76 FPS, which is really good. So it would seem that if you want to run this at 4K, you should probably turn off ray tracing. But if you don't mind running it at 1440p, you could turn on ray tracing and still manage to get over 60 frames per second. So really just depends on what you're looking for here. We'll try this one more time after this at 1440p without ray tracing on and just see what we can get out of this. You know, I might even do 1080p without ray tracing. If there are specific setups that you'd like me to run to see what kind of FPS we can get, definitely let me know in the comments below. I'll be more than happy to run that and maybe post another video or just reply to your comment. So if there's something specific you want to see, drop it down in the comments. Okay, there we go. Average FPS of 77, minimum 69, nice, max 89. So yeah, this would be perfect for that. Let's go ahead and turn off ray tracing and we'll run this benchmark once more at 1440p, high settings, no ray tracing. All right, here we go, over 100 FPS. So if you don't care about ray tracing and if 1440p is good for you and you just want maximum frames, then this would be fine. Personally, I'll probably run it at 1440p with ray tracing just because I like to have that little bit of extra flair. And really 1440p versus 4K on what I'm using, which is a 27-inch monitor, is not going to be much of a difference. But if you're just looking to get max FPS, you can remove ray tracing, you can drop down the resolution, and this will definitely work. And there we have it, 113 frames per second, minimum 97, max almost 140. That is fantastic. And just for fun, I want to see what happens when we turn this down as low as it can go. We'll take it down to 1080p because that's a reasonable resolution to use. And graphics, let's take it to, we'll run it at medium. So medium, 1080p, obviously ray tracing is off. Let's go ahead and see what this can do. Medium 1080p. All right, 200 FPS. This is absolutely insane. I can't imagine a situation in which somebody would want this many FPS out of this particular game, but if that's what you want, if you want 200 frames, then you can absolutely go with this and it'll do it for you. 1080p medium settings. All right, there we go. 204 average frames per second, minimum 173, max 241. Absolutely insane. Of course, no one's going to be running this 1080p medium with the setup that we have here, but I just thought you should see it. Let's go ahead and wrap this thing up. It's been a lot of fun testing out these games, but let's go ahead and finish this up and I'll give you my final thoughts. So I think it's safe to say that this PC can handle pretty much anything I throw at it, whether that's gaming or editing. If you're curious about how I built this thing, definitely check out my full build video right over here at the end of this one. I'll walk you through the entire process. And again, for those of you that are looking to build something similar, I've linked all the parts below, including the best prices I could find. Using those links does help support the channel, so I really appreciate it. Oh, and speaking of PC builds, I'm planning my next one very soon, but I'm trying to decide on a budget. Should I aim for under $1,000 or push it higher for more power? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and help me decide. All right, now jump on over to that build video and I'll catch you there. Be good.